Hey everybody, welcome back to Help Me Parent. My name is Kylie, and with me as always is Dr. Ellen Moore. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And today we have with us Dwayne and Stacy Reiner. Hi guys.
Good morning.
Welcome to the podcast. Y'all so excited. Yes, it's going to be good. But just before, for anybody watching, introduce yourselves. Tell us how long you've been married, kids, all your details.
All right, I'm Stacy, and go ahead.
Dwayne, we both work at the Ark Church. Been here for a while, and we have been married. This May will be 25 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That he got it right.
Nice.
Got it right.
Good job.
So that, and then so we have two kids. We have an adopted daughter, and we have a son, Nathan.
And how old is he?
17.
17. Ooh, so fun.
And then
Teenagers.
our adopted daughter was a teenager when she came to live with us. So
Nice.
we had the rare experience of instant teenage years.
Oh, nice.
And how old was Nathan when
Two.
she came?
2.5.
Two.
So you had a 2-year-old.
Yes.
And,
Went from potty training to teenager instantly.
Like,
13.
this is-
She was 13.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, just
Jen-
turned
To
13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jen was 13. So,
That's crazy. And y'all aren't from Texas. Y'all are from Georgia.
yes.
Which state is better?
Oh my gosh. Are you asking that right now,
Too
Kylie?
dangerous. I can't say that because Texas people are very proud of their state. Wouldn't want to say anything. Let's put it this way. I like Texas a lot. The only thing that Texas can't do is two things they can't do are grits and sweet tea. So they can improve on those areas. But other than that, Texas is awesome.
We love Texas, but go dogs.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
There
we
it
definitely.
is.
Yeah.
There
I'm
it
glad
is.
Stacy was the one who said that, not Dwayne.
I know.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little fun fact about y'all. Y'all are high school sweethearts.
We are.
So y'all have been dating since high school. Just kind of tell us about that. Is it best choice you've ever made? Yes, the answer is yes.
She's
Most days.
still-
No, it is.
She's still deciding.
Good.
Jury's still out.
How old were you when you met?
I was 15 when we started dating. I think I knew who he was in like my 6th grade year.
We
or
were in a
his
small
6th grade
town.
year.
So
Okay.
just for reference, the middle school and the high school were on the same campus.
That's how mine
That's how
was.
small it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were dating. I had just turned 16, and Stacy was like 15 and a half. Like she was just, so we were in different grades, but because she has a December birthday.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's
So yeah, so we started dating then. So
All right. So that's a whole nother spin on
yes,
teenage.
on the teenagers. Like it's so
Right.
interesting because we're talking about we've been talking about parenting through all the different stages.
Right.
And y'all are here for the teenage part of it. And that is something interesting nowadays. It's relationships and dating is a big thing with teenagers, always has been, probably always will be.
right.
How have y'all been navigating that with Nathan, or how did y'all do it a few years ago? And then anything y'all did in y'all's time take to now either?
So it's interesting. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting thing. If people watching or listening, if they were in the church in the 90s, they'll understand what we're about to talk about. But when we started dating, well, Stacy's the only person I've ever dated. But when we started dating, we were in our church and our youth group and stuff. And that was right at the time when I Kissed Dating Goodbye became a mega bestseller. So we
which
were
is the name of a book.
name
Yeah,
of a
I was
book.
about to go, what?
Yeah.
It's the name of a book.
Yes, that's why I said if you were in the church in the 90s in an
was
evangelical church, you knew what that was probably. But yeah, it was a book, it was written, became extremely popular. And basically the whole idea was don't date, court, and they had a whole process for that, group dating, all those kinds of things. So we dated each other. And so we were like the opposite of what the book said. So we caught some grief in church from the youth group because of that. So it was kind of an interesting experience in that, growing up in that world where we were actually bucking what was then the trend. Now it probably wouldn't be seen that way, but it was pretty interesting back then.
Well, now even probably the trend now is being in one relationship, like actually being in a relationship with one person, or not over like text or through social media, like in person in a relationship? Would you kind of say that's something teenagers are going through?
It's well, it's interesting. I don't know for sure because we tried to keep the social media thing a little bit under wraps for a while. Like, so Nathan just got Instagram, but before that, and so he's 17. So we hadn't do it until this year, but we did that on purpose because so many of the kids nowadays, the Instagram stuff or Facebook is this, seems to create a challenge when it comes to relationships and dating, friendships and dating relationships. So I think that helped us avoid some of those challenges, but I see from adjacent to Nathan, so like friends of Nathan, through what we're learning from him, we see how a lot of those kids have been caught up in a lot of difficult things because they were through the social media contacts.
Yeah.
We talked about it in the, I think the digital media episode, but even though I think Instagram and Facebook, you can legally get an account at 13. Is that right?
I think so.
But even the Surgeon General of the United States recommends not doing it before age 16.
Yeah.
So to me, if the Surgeon General is backing that, from his perspective, I think that's really interesting. And so my hat's off to y'all for holding out.
It was different with Jen. One, social media was different.
Yeah.
So when she came to live with us, she already had MySpace.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes back to when that was.
I see.
So it was hard because we couldn't it was harder to try to back that up. Whereas with Nathan, we can kind of set that precedent from the beginning. So then we had to navigate with her. But looking back, it probably would have been better to just said, hey, let's not do that when you, even though now that you're here, I know you had it before, but we were kind of figuring it out as we went. So we weren't sure. But looking back, I think it would have been better even then at the infancy stages of social media to have probably had her just back off of that and wait.
Yeah.
But so it's things you learn.
Do you think it's different because of how social media developed or because Jen is a girl and Nathan's a guy? Like having that conversation. Was it harder with one of them because of their gender or just kind of how
I think
media
it's
was?
equally hard with both of them. They both struggle with the same potential issues and just having these outside voices speak into their life that you as a parent have a hard time of gatekeeping when they have social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was definitely a challenge that we had with Jen, and we wanted to be more intentional about postponing that as long as we could with Nate. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of applied some of your practices, but then applied them with Nathan as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn and grow with each kid.
Yeah.
Do it a little different. You're a different parent with each kid.
Yeah.
A bit.
I think it would be interesting because you all have a different perspective. When our kids were junior high, there wasn't social media. So I had a lot less experience. It wasn't really till a little bit in high school, but more college that we entered that. So in holding Nathan off, I am assuming that was against the norm
Very much.
for his friend group and all of that. What were those conversations like that you had with Nate regarding social media, him not having it, his friends having it, just all of that?
Most of it was just about us, the goal, just protecting his heart and being able to gatekeep. I'd given him a story about, when I was a kid and somebody called my house, my dad answered the phone or my mom answered the phone and they knew who was calling and they would choose to hand me the phone or not. And when you have social
And they
media,
would also listen in on the other
and they would
phone
listen in on the other one.
Right.
But with social media, there's just a lot of ways to circumvent, parental involvement and gatekeeping and stuff. So it was always from the perspective of, we love you enough to try to protect you from things that you don't understand right now is even out there.
And he wasn't necessarily happy I mean,
Yeah.
he would get annoyed with us.
Yeah.
And then he would plead his case. He would wait a few months and then plead it again. But there were a few times where he would say, like, something would happen to his friends, and then he would say, "Well, I'm glad I don't have social media." So he would let that out, and then a few months later he'd come back and want it again. So it was it wasn't easy for him, and so we had to disappoint him a lot. But unfortunately, with teenagers, if you love them, you'll disappoint them.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
It's true. And I think that is a really good point, and a great way to phrase it is like being a gatekeeper. And that's a great analogy for, I mean, people a little bit older than millennial parents. Who we did have, just the landline, and there were ways to go about it. And I think a lot of parents seem to have a little hesitancy on or question if they should monitor their child's digital activity. But I think if we compare it to the landlines, it's really the same thing.
Right.
And yes, we should monitor and be a gatekeeper, know what's happening once they do get social media, once they do get a phone, that we are monitoring their activity, not in a nosy way, but there's no such thing as privacy.
No.
For a child living in your home.
No.
You are not you're not going against their rights or anything.
Right.
They have none. I mean, they're kids and they need to be protected. And so to look at it as protection, as gatekeeping, not invading their privacy, is a great way to look at it. And I think really important.
I've told Nathan before, and Jen was like, we're like, hey, look, I'm just going to tell you, the Holy Spirit is going to alert us to things that are happening.
Yeah.
So just be prepared if you're doing something. And every time with both of them, there were things going on. We always had a check in us before it, and it led to us doing some deeper digging.
Yeah.
And then we were able to uncover some things that we had to address with both of them. But I just always let them know, it's like, we're going to check things, but we're also just going to hear from the Lord. I'm just telling you, the Holy Spirit is going to rat you out if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And but you really do, like, that's as a Christian, you have help in the parenting thing, because the teenage years are hard, I think. And I think that, and as a parent of a teenager, you need all the help you can get. And just doing it by yourself is just not enough. You really need the help of the Lord to be able to give you some wisdom, because there's going to be things that you can't see that are under the surface. And the Lord has this way of being able to give you the wisdom to know how to uncover it, or just the wisdom to know something's there you need to ask, or you need to search, or you need to look.
Yeah.
And it's always been, even though they probably didn't enjoy it at the moment, I think they appreciated in the end that they were able to have some, resolution to that.
Yeah. What have y'all done as parents to kind of be sensitive to the Holy Spirit and really receive things for your kids from the Lord? How have you done that as a couple or individually in regards to receiving wisdom for them?
I think it's just always asking the Lord, show me the things that I need to see here. What's below the surface, what's coming down the road, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just always be asking the question, always be listening, because we've had prompts before of things. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's not, and we just kind of shirked it off, and it ended up being something we needed to pay attention to.
Yeah. Things we should have jumped on a little faster even, but you're just not 100% sure. So I think if you're a parent, you're a Christian, if you send something, go with it.
Yeah.
You're not going to hurt the child by just investigating and looking into it. So I think don't hesitate is something we've learned a
Yeah.
little bit more. I think that's something we learned over time, though, a little bit trial and error, is like trust that check from the Holy Spirit, because the Lord's just trying to help you because he loves the kid and wants to help the kid. And there's a, and Proverbs talks a lot about how discipline is beneficial. So the Lord's just using you to bring discipline in order to make the child a better person, a stronger person, a healthier person. So I think in today's society, discipline almost has a negative connotation. Yeah. It's like it almost becomes equated with abuse, and those things are so far apart. And with a teenager, the type of punishments you give change. And so that we had to adapt to that, different styles, what actually works with them, what kind of is a thing, what kind is a motivator. But regardless, discipline actually blesses the child. And even as a teenager, they need that. And it's the Lord's, it's a blessing from the Lord to have discipline in your life to correct things, so that you look at it as you're giving the kid an opportunity to have a better life, to have a healthier life, a happier life, because they're no longer caught in something that's going to derail them or hurt them.
Yeah. I think they function better too when they know what the clear boundaries are and what the expectations are. And we've always wanted to, let's have those conversations on the front end. So, if you slip up, and it's going to happen, but if you mess up, then we don't have to have this big whole why. It's this is what happened. How did we get here? And deal with how do we keep it from happening again?
But that's where Stacy's been better than me in some things. I think I grew up in a loving home, but it was very, very disciplined, very, follow the rules. I like following rules. And so when you don't follow the rules, there's, ready to do a consequence, whatever. But Stacy has actually been really good about reminding me in the teenage years to give more grace and to recognize that it's not all lost if there's a mess up. Yeah. And I don't know if other parents maybe struggle with this too as the teenage years, but that line between holding them accountable and showing them some grace, I think, is an area where I've struggled, but where I've been able to follow, I think, Stacy's lead a lot better.
Well, they're practicing being adults, and they're not always going to get it right.
Yes. Right. And we've talked about it a lot through several episodes, but what you were saying, discipline isn't a bad word, and discipline doesn't even mean punishment.
Right.
Discipline means training.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're training our kids at every stage. In infants, we're training them, helping them to become human beings, almost, and learn all of these like physical things. And so at every stage, they're being trained for the next stage. And at teenage years, I think it just becomes like so more in your face. You feel the clock ticking.
Yes. Yes.
In the back of your head, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we only have this much more time with them in our house, with almost 24/7 opportunity. And we know that's slipping away. And it's like, have we done everything? Have we said everything?
Right.
Have we helped you in every way we can to prepare you for the next stage? So I think that's one of the reasons that teenage years can have just a little bit heightened. There's a huge opportunity for fear.
Yeah.
And because you just feel that clock ticking.
Well, that's where I made a big mistake with Jen. So, we were 30, I think, when she came to live with us.
20
you were
something,
29, I think, and I was 30.
So young.
Yeah.
Barely out of teenage years yourselves.
A lot younger than we realized at the moment.
Yes.
But so anyway, and she didn't grow up with us. And so we're bringing her into our house, and I became consumed with trying to catch her up with everything I felt like was important for her to know, the things of the Lord, everything, to the point where I felt like I went overboard and I lost the grace and the joy because of the ticking clock
Yeah.
was just, it was pounding
Yeah.
in me. And
Yeah.
I made a big mistake with that. And I think that I could have backed off a little bit and shown more grace and just maybe a little bit more trust in the Lord
Yeah.
to fill some gaps. And I think I would have accomplished more. And so like even, it was like year or two ago, I was talking to her on the phone because now she's in her late 20s and lives on her own. And I was talking to her and I said, I'm really sorry that I did that because I was afraid. And that was, I would do it differently now, but I just said, I'm sorry that I kind of put that on you, but I really did it because I loved you and I wanted you to have a good life, but I made a mistake.
Yeah.
So
That's so good. And I think it's so good for parents to realize and to kind of catch ourselves in this stage, and being able to name the fear,
yeah,
to just recognize the fear in us, because when the fear is there, where we tend to go one way or the other, you kind of take a hands off and say,
yeah,
I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything.
right,
Or you go the other extreme,
Yeah.
and it's like, I am so afraid of what is down the road for
Right.
you that we just clamp down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can go either way. And so the fact that you recognize that, and when you did recognize it, then you just say, I'm sorry, you change, and which is such a great example for our kids
Yeah.
when they hear and see us. And that is training. That's parenting.
Yeah.
It's like, here's what you do. You're not going to always get it right. And so when you don't,
Right.
here's what you do.
Yeah.
You say, I am so sorry. And that's so good. And I'm sure that just meant a lot to her. But I think just recognizing the fear and what you said too about it's an opportunity to trust the Lord, because yes, the Lord has given us these kids. He's entrusted them to us. He's done that on purpose. He's done it for a purpose. But like anything else with God, it's not all on our shoulders.
right,
Yeah.
He's got them. He loves them more than we do.
Right.
He will fill in the gaps. And so we do the best we can.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you just talked about, what Dwayne was talking about, going to the kid and apologizing to them. How I feel like as a human, it's hard to go to somebody and admit you're wrong, much less your kid, who probably hopefully looks up to you second to God, like there's like God and then you. How do you approach that in a, hey, I have to say I'm sorry for something, in a non-prideful, how do you get rid of the pride to do that?
Practice it.
Yeah.
Practice. The more you do it, the easier that it gets, kind of. I mean, it's never easy, I don't think. But like when Nathan especially was like little and he did something, part of what the learning experience for him was, apologizing when he does something wrong. And we can't ask him to apologize for something if we're not apologizing when we mess up.
Yeah.
And if we're not apologizing, then we're setting the table for him that they're perfect, and there's this standard and people don't make mistakes or whatever. So it's, we all make mistakes, and we all have times where we have to say, hey, I messed up here, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree. I think the more you do it, I think the more we do it between us and the Lord helps to say, Lord, I messed up here. And I'm so sorry. Will you please forgive me? I think that helps set the stage of our heart to then be able to go to other people, be it a spouse, a child, a peer, a coworker, is keeping our hearts tender and soft before the Lord helps to have those conversations.
And when there's a that saying you're sorry and forgiveness, they're very empowering things.
Yeah.
But sometimes maybe as parents forget that they're empowering for our kids as well. And when you genuinely ask your child to forgive you and tell them you're sorry, one, you're empowering them to make a choice to forgive, and you're giving them the freedom to let go of resentment and bitterness they might hold towards you. Because one of the things you learn as a parent of teenagers is that you become painfully aware of how you mess up and how you have messed up, and they know you've messed up. They're not stupid. They're pretty smart, and they know it. And when you don't admit that, I think you open the door for them to feel bitterness about that, because they're like, because it seems a bit hypocritical. And so I think it just makes the relationship stronger. And also there's a tenderness, I think, that forms. And as a parent of a teenager, tenderness is not a common thing that happens in teenage years, but it happens when you ask forgiveness and allow them to genuinely respond to that.
I think it helps build trust too, is that, I genuinely care about your feelings. I genuinely care that I hurt you. That's not ever my goal. And so I think it helps to build trust there.
And I've done it with Nathan where I've apologized for the way I responded to something, but not for the reason I responded. So I've said to him, like, hey, I overreacted here and I was wrong. But you still should have gotten your assignments done or something like that. Like, this doesn't let you off the hook of that, but I need you to know I need to respond better next time and do it in a healthy way. So there's also that element. It's like, just because you're saying you're sorry, it doesn't mean the kid didn't do something that was wasn't wrong or wasn't missing the mark. So two things can be true at once, and so you can deal with both.
Yeah. They needed correction.
Yes.
Right.
They needed redirection.
Right.
But the way I went about it could have been better. And it's like we've talked about, more is caught than taught. You can talk to your kids all day about forgiveness, and you need to forgive your friend. You need to tell us you're sorry.
Yeah.
But more is caught than taught. So when we have those moments that we own it, and I think too, something that you said is to name. It's not just I'm sorry. It's I'm sorry that or I'm sorry for overreacting, or for just naming it and saying, because you know what, and kind of giving the reason. I was afraid. I was fearful. And to tell them, I feel this clock ticking, and you're about to go off to college or be in a new season of life, and I just want to make sure you're prepared. But out of that fear, that I'm working on trusting God more, because I know He's got good plans for you, and I know He is helping you, and you are listening to Him, and He's going to speak in a way that you can hear, and you can bless all of those things by naming it, and not this vague, oh, I'm sorry. So I think that's
so I think a lot of parents especially like new teenage parents, struggle with this. The idea of starting to let them have more leash, starting to let them go a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a struggle for parents, especially the early teenage years, but even as they get older to start driving. So what do you think, what do you say to those parents about that process of starting to let them go?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind is kind of what Stacy said regarding forgiveness. You practice.
Yeah.
You practice not. I think our Pastor Allen, he talks about it this way. It's like a slinky or a spring. And when they're little, you're kind of holding it down. And you've got these really firm boundaries. And as they get older, you are gradually releasing the pressure and the control.
Yeah.
And we are gradually losing control. And that's not a bad thing. It's a right thing. So I think in a perfect world, we're doing it gradually and we're practicing a little bit more. It helps when they, that's one of the reasons a lot of moms especially, but dads have a hard time on the first day of school. It's like, oh my gosh, you're going to be out of my sight for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And I have no control over your environment, what's going to happen to you, or what you're going to do that I'm not going to know about. And so it's this losing control thing. But if we can do it gradually, as they get older, as they show themselves to be responsible, that we're looking for those opportunities to say, you know what? You did your homework without me reminding you one time. You got it in on time. Way to go. And we look for ways that it's so easy for us to look for all the ways they're getting it wrong. That just is glaring in our face. But if we look for the ways that they are being responsible, that they are being trustworthy, that they are being honest, and we are looking for that and blessing that all along the way, it's kind of like we're telling ourselves, and training ourselves, hey, they're going to be okay. All is not lost.
Right.
They are not going to be delinquents. So as that can happen gradually, now, obviously, none of us are perfect. So sometimes we let too much pressure off, and it's like, oh gosh, I got to bring it back. And I think in those, especially with teenagers, we're just honest with them and say, you know what? I gave you a little too much freedom here. And so for your sake, as well as my sake, we're going to bring it back to here. And then, or sometimes we need to say, you know what? I've kept it down. I've applied too much pressure here, and I need to let off a little bit. And so, you know what? This decision is yours. If they're asking for permission to go somewhere, go to a friend's house or to a party or to whatever, at some point we say, you know what? I want you to think about it, ask the Lord, and you make the decision. And I will tell you my opinion, and we will trust the Lord that if it's the right one, that we're both hearing the same thing. If it's the wrong one, you know what? We'll figure that out too.
Yeah. That's good.
It's kind of going back to we've talked about the different stages of parenting, what your role is as a parent, because you're stepping into, correct me if I'm wrong, you're stepping into that coaching stage, right? Where you're still there, but you're kind of like taking a step back. Why do you think that's hard for most parents of like older teenagers?
Scary. It's scary because you've taught them, you've taught them. It's kind of up to them to whether they're starting to practice it or not.
They're big enough and strong enough and mobile enough to cause damage. It's not like the toddler years where you can grab them and hold them. But they're still not as fully formed as they think they are mentally, like emotionally, maturity wise. And I think the hardest thing for a parent is we know that they'll mess up. The fear is that they'll mess up irreparably. That something will happen that will change the course of their life, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think that's the big fear that parents have. And they have the potential to do that when they walk out the door and you let them. And so I think that that's what drives a lot of the fear is I don't want my kid to do something that ruins their life. And we've seen stories of that happening. So we know it's not like it's a irrational fear. We know it happens. But at the same time, you can't prevent that from happening by just locking them away.
Right. Or to put that on them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to say, well, I've seen, you know, car wrecks happen and, you know, people go to jail or people accidentally take someone's life, you know, these kind of worst case scenarios. But the truth is, yes, that can happen. And if it does, we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Even that's not too big for God.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, talking about like that. Throughout all of our conversation, it's always going to the Lord for your kids, encouraging them to go to the Lord. But I feel like that's not a popular thing with teenagers nowadays, like to constantly go there. So how do you help them and kind of guide them to the Lord when it's not popular?
I think you have to show them in your own life, like, you know, when something stressful is going on, or, you know, when something, you know, affects our family, we model what that looks like. I liked what you said, more's caught than taught. And so I think for us, more so than lecturing about it or that kind of thing, it's okay, this is stressful, but we know we can trust God here. And we talk about the times that, okay, he's come through and he stepped in here when we weren't sure how it was going to work out, you know? So I think
too, like, it's not, they're going to go through seasons where they test. Because they're discovering who they are. And for some reason, as a teenager, just a lot of times, they're just not sure they want to be like you. They want to test it out. What would it be like if I were the opposite of mom and dad? What would it be like if I did my own path? And a lot of times, so that means if you're a believer and you've raised them in church, sometimes they're going to question that, or they're going to test that. Well, what if I didn't do this? What if God wasn't real? What if God didn't have anything to do with my life? And so there's part of that where you have to give them some space to express that and not freak out about it. That's one thing. And then the second thing is that you recognize, well, if they're going through a period like this, or they're going through a moment where they don't like talking about God, tough. We're going to talk about God. I know you may not love that, but you know what? You still live in my house, and we love the Lord, and we go to the Lord for help. So you may not totally agree with everything or think everything's correct, but we're still going to do it. My dad was the epitome of the rebellious teenager. I mean, he ran away from home when he was 16, all the way. They were in Savannah. He ran all the way to Atlanta and was on the streets there for a few weeks or a few days or whatever. And then it was the early days of drugs. He was into marijuana when it was highly, illegal and frowned upon, and just everything. So, but he would come in he said sometimes he would come in drunk or stoned in the night, and he would hear his mother praying for him. And he hated it. But years later, he got saved, and now he's been a pastor now for like 40 years. And the thing is he now recognizes how essential that was to hear that and to experience that. And sometimes your kids are going to hate things that are of the Lord because they're just running from whatever God's got for them, because, Satan loves to try to take away those things. He doesn't want them to have an abundant, happy, full life. And sometimes you just got to press through and do those things, even if they're not loving it at the moment, because it's for their good. And like I said, with my dad, I felt like it made the difference that his mom persevered in praying for him in the moments where he hated it the most.
Yeah, I think that's so good you just live it and you talk about it. And they may or may not want to talk about it at any given time, and that's okay. But they hear you all talking about it, and they hear that you are praying for them. I think telling our kids that we're praying for them, and I think that what your dad experienced is so good. Our kids hearing us pray out loud for them does something. It does something in their heart, but it actually does something in their brain. that stores it in a different place that allows the recall to come at just the right time and to be triggered by just the right thing. And so I think that's so good to live it, talk about it, and pray it out loud. Yeah. I wanted to just ask one question because I think this is a big one for parents of teenagers. And it's kind of where we started the episode, but the dating piece and relationships, all of that. How, because you guys started dating at 15 and 16. So how is it different? How is it the same? And how is it different now? Did you allow Nathan to start dating at 16? And, you know, what did that look like? And, because again, I think even when our kids were 15 and 16, it was a little bit different time.
Yeah. We did let him start dating. I think that I think the differences are, a lot of it's probably technology, honestly. Like there's constant access, that kind of thing. When we dated, there was no call waiting at first, that kind of thing. So we had set amounts of time that we can talk and this and that and the other, but they have such access to each other, you know, through texting. And
that's I think that's the more challenging part is that they have constant access. They can, you know, FaceTime, they can text. I mean, there's all sorts of methods. So yeah, with us, we had to call and talk to each other on the phone, and we would have to get off if someone else had to use the phone, you know. And we had set, like our parents had set times, like your parents, so like had rules about we could call between this time and this time, and that was it. And so, but with the texting and everything, and also it's interesting now, kids don't really talk on the phone that much.
Right.
They text each other. So it's a little bit different because when they're on the phone, even if you're not listening in, you can overhear conversations. You get a sense of what they're talking about. With the texting, it becomes a lot more private. So I think that's a challenging aspect to that. Whereas when I will say, when we were dating, some of that, the fact that your parents could be so aware of what you were talking about or you're doing, it created a certain level of accountability that's harder to have now.
yeah, you definitely have to be more intentional about it.
As a parent.
Define dating. What was dating when you all dated? And what, when Nathan was 16, 17, how was dating defined? And what did it look like?
We started dating, we did go on like one-on-one dates.
Okay. So your parents took you before you could drive?
I think before
at
we could drive, we
first,
just hung out each other's
We just
house.
hung out at each other's houses.
Okay.
So our families were there, of course, and that kind of thing.
And youth group
And then
was our source
most
of
of
dating.
what we did was centered around the youth
So,
group because that was one of the only times that we would get to see each other during the week.
We didn't go to the
couldn't
same
date on
church at
school
first.
night.
Okay.
So
Eventually, they started coming to my dad's church, but
Okay.
not at first. So so
but going to church was a date.
yes, that was a date.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
But then once we were able
Once
to
we were able to
drive,
drive,
we
then we
did
would
go
go
on like one-on-one dates. But we pretty quickly considered, exclusive. We were exclusive with each other. And
yes,
I mean, honestly, the marriage conversation came up very quick. So
yeah, which is probably scary for any
Yeah.
parent of a teenager.
They're like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah, no, but I don't know. We were. It was weird. I mean, I think honestly, by the time I think at the time I was 17, 16, 17, I knew that we were going to get married. So
All right. So I know we're almost out of time, but what did a date look like then for Nathan?
well, at first it was groups because one, he couldn't drive at the time, so that created that.
And they still do. They do one-on-one dates, but a lot of their dates are actually at our house. So
We
they,
prefer it that way to do a lot of dating with the family. So it's fine if you want to come hang out at the house and watch movies and something. But we kind of like that a little bit. I mean, we do allow one-on-one dates.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you drive him?
Well, she
Actually,
drives.
his girlfriend can take, his girlfriend can drive. So
Okay.
yeah, so they will go there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they do go by themselves.
Yes.
But we would rather just kind of incorporate her into what we're doing, and
And actually, funny, they do use church as a date as well.
yes,
Yeah, Wednesday night church is a date for them because it's a school night,
Yeah.
which we really don't want him to do dating on school night. So it's a little bit of a hack on their part.
Yeah.
If she
Yeah.
comes to church,
but we'll take
They
it.
can
We'll
still
take
see
it.
totally.
It
So yeah,
equals
so
out.
Totally.
we're fine with that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's the right way that every parent should do it. I mean, it's nuanced
Sure.
by kid, and
Yeah.
we're still figuring it out a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, we did allow Jen to go on one-on-one dates
Yeah.
when she was a teenager. So that, it just is something you have to just take. And it might not even look the same. If you have two teenagers, you might not even do it the same
Yeah.
way with
Yes.
the teenagers,
Yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, depends on the
totally.
kid.
Yeah.
To wrap up, what is the best part of being a parent to a teenager?
The light at the end of the tunnel.
I was like, he's
I'm,
good.
I'm joking.
I think it requires a lot of personal growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that once we hit teenage years, the value of praying for we've always prayed for our kids, but there's a naive sense of, hey, I can keep them safe and I can keep things controlled when they're little and when they're starting to practice on their own. It requires a lot of trust in the Lord to just watch over them and know that He loves them and He's going to take care of them. So for me, it's been it's probably one of the biggest growing experiences. Yeah.
And I joke a little bit about that, but there is some truth. Like as your kids become more independent. So I think one thing that's important for every parent is find things you enjoy about every stage of their growth.
Yeah.
Don't always look to the past as that was the good days.
Yeah.
And that's because that's not true. Every day has its good things and its bad things. But enjoy their stage you're in. But but as they become more independent, you actually get to enjoy that too, because you get to date your spouse and to hang out with them and grow that relationship. And I feel like sometimes too many parents, they get so busy with their kids, then their kids get older, and then they're like, what do we do now? It's like, enjoy yourself, like have fun, go on dates. You can let them grow up and do their thing. And still you're going to obviously do family stuff, but you can allow them to have fun. And then you can go on and do fun stuff with your spouse. And it becomes this new opportunity that you didn't have when they were 3 or 4 years old to do that. And so enjoy it. Like that's actually a fun thing, is to get to experience that aspect that maybe you had lost for a few years in the busyness of raising small kids.
Yeah.
And then also too, it's encouraging to see them grow and learn and as they get a little bit older, the older they get, the less dumb you are, which is a good thing. So when they're 12 or 13, you're probably one of the dumbest people alive. When they get to be about 17, 18, all of a sudden you become vastly more intelligent. And it's a wonderful thing to realize that you've grown smarter over the last few years, because your kids do develop an appreciation for you the older they get. And that's a blessing.
Yeah. So
I think one of my favorite things about the teenage years was just the conversations. They're just so different. And it's like, oh my gosh, I love how you have your own thoughts, and you get to know them as, it's like, oh my gosh, you are a person and you are very different from me. And you are having different thoughts, different ideas. So I think that's super fun about the teenage years.
It's not as bad as everybody says. Like,
No,
it's kind of like the terrible twos. Everybody's like, terrible twos. Twos aren't necessarily bad. They have their challenges. And a lot of times people talk negatively about the teenage years. And it is challenging. No one's saying it's not, but it's also not terrible. It's not a bad time to raise a kid. And every generation has had challenges with their teens.
Yeah.
Yes.
So our generation is no different than they were in the 20s.
Yeah.
The things they complained about teenagers back then principally are the same we do now, just with different methods. So it's just enjoy it. Enjoy the kids.
There'll be things that you miss about this stage too when it's past. So don't
Yeah.
Don't go past it.
yeah.
That's good. Yeah, so if you're starting out as with teenagers, good luck. But it's gonna be worth it. Well, thank you guys for being on the podcast. We appreciate y'all coming in. It was great. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Just remember that you can parent and we can help.